Hello, everybody out there in radio land. It is once again that time of the week where I come onto your radio dial or talk to you on the World Wide Web about what is actually going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective. It is Media Cyphers. Your weekly program where we dig underneath the headlines, tell y'all what is really going down, and generally call out the establishment on its BS. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So again, if you're a regular listener, I'm sorry we were gone last week. I had to run a family medical appointment, and sometimes, again, our absences are a little bit more auspicious than others. And last week, okay, there's an old quote from Vladimir Lenin. There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen. And our last show, again, we missed last week's show. Our last show was about 100 years ago. It would seem, because a lot has happened in the last 2 weeks, and we are going to do our best to try to catch up on all of that. And of course, also want to spend some time talking about some local Michigan stories that may have kind of escaped the headlines. Now, a lot of times we'll do like some kind of election post mortem, and I'm going to do a little bit of that, but I'm not going to necessarily go in as much depth as I usually do on these, just because we're about 2 weeks out. What I will say is, so we had Drew Duncan, Jacqueline Slobby, and Stephanie Hoffman, all getting elected to the commission. Which is kind of a good week for kind of politically progressive residents of Kalamazoo. Basically, a lot of them. They had gotten endorsements from people like Don Cooney, Drew Duncan. I know had been endorsed by We the People, which is fighting for tenants' rights. Um, Now, there's always a caveat to this sort of thing, which is to say that while we may have gotten people who are more politically progressive on the commission, um, the nature of the institution of the city commission itself does create a lot of restraints on what they are able to do. And something that is really important to consider again in this new uh, what is it era, we have a new city manager, and the city manager of Kalamazoo has a lot of outsized power compared to other cities. Also, and without necessarily beating a dead horse, but this needs to be brought up. Kalamazoo, the city of Kalamazoo, has a very unique funding mechanism. It does not directly pull from taxes. Rather, it is from the Foundation for Excellence, which is basically based on direct philanthropic donations, primarily from the city's ruling class. As economists like Richard Wolff have referred to it as basically a 21st century company town model. We've talked about it a lot on the show as being kind of a way the rich can avoid being taxed and have this outsized leverage for the city. There was a lot of discussion when it first passed. Oh my, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of the Foundation for Excellence, and we're going to have to do a big episode about that. Um, but there's a lot of discussion at the time about how this gives the city's ruling class an overt power of the purse that they in many ways, shapes, and form the wealthy already have, but it gives an explicit, if the city, let's say, you know, um, there was a sweep of revolutionary Marxists in a particular election. Let's just say fancifully that happened. Now, if we had a situation where, say, well, we don't really the rich people are like, we don't really like having a bunch of revolutionary Marxists on the board. And the donations to the Foundation for Excellence are going to dry up. What do you mean you want, housing for all? What do you mean you want to use public funds to uplift the poor? What do you mean you want to, again, enhance public services at the detriment of gentrification? Well, it would be very, very easy for the ruling class of Kalamazoo to pull the plug, to turn off the spigot in a way that is not necessarily the same across the country. Now, there is always the threat of capital flight. That is the idea that capitalists will say, if you increase taxes too much here, we're going to fly away. We're going to go. But that also that incurs a certain financial penalty onto them as well. This kind of model basically enables them to, again, have it both ways. They get praised for being philanthropists who quote unquote save the city, while basically having this backdoor control over it. And it's something that I've criticized for many years. And it's something that, you know, save two commissioners at the time, everyone else embraced. Now, it's not to say that those were easy times. There were proposals to have a progressive income tax, i.e., tax the rich. And it was literally because of legalities at the state level. They were basically at that same time making it harder to do that sort of progressive income tax. And it was also that specter of capital flight was also coming up a lot behind the scenes. And you even have people like, outgoing progressive Commissioner Don Cooney, who voted in favor of the foundation. And again, it is because of that hope that we can use some of these money and resources to, help address some of the real tangible needs in the city of Kalamazoo. But it's always been, at best, something of a devil's bargain. And I think the bottom line that I'm really trying to get to here is yes, we may have some progressive politicians, although with some links to real estate, I'm not quite comfortable with, but we have progressives on the city commission. But the thing is, because of the financial structure of our city, even if you had somebody who wanted to come in and make sweeping changes. And by the way, the reelection of Mayor David Anderson is not necessarily a great omen for that. His campaign pitch throughout last season was basically nothing will fundamentally change. It was you look at all of the answers, and it's his first explaining why it's not the city's job to do X, Y, or Z, which again, some of this might be technically true, but it does definitely speak to a lack of vision, a lack of willingness to step up in ways that the residents of Kalamazoo want them to do. I will also say, while it seemed like there were more interesting candidates in this particular election. That did not necessarily pan out when it came to voter turnout, which was actually lower than it was in 2023. And if you are a longtime listener, I kind of called that a bit of a dud election. There was really nobody, there were not a lot of people running that I thought were particularly compelling. Um, aside from I think I do have a lot of respect for Esteban Juarez. I don't think he did not end up squeaking through. And we've also had some good things to say over the years about some back and forth about Chris Pradell. He definitely seems to care. Sometimes his policies and politics don't pan out in quite the right way, but he is a very attentive city commissioner. But I say that to say in the 2023 election, you had a 24% voter turnout, which is still pretty anemic. You're talking about 176,000 plus registered voters with only about 41,000 ballots cast. Now let's look at 2025. This is this is a watershed year. This is a year, everything going on with the Trump administration. People's eyes are focused on how is the city going to respond to this stuff. So we've got candidates on the ballot who've been really hitting the ground and putting their message out. Well, there's actually less people came out to vote. This year, only 23% of registered voters in Kalamazoo came out to vote. That was about 39,000 ballots were cast. Now, what does it necessarily seem to say? And perhaps I'm reaching too far with this, but the situation I just described to you, and it's not as though I have gone into every block, every neighborhood doing lectures about the Foundation for Excellence, but it may just be that there is a pervasive sense in this city that the people who actually control the city do not sit at the city commission. They sit over at Southwest Michigan First. They sit writing checks on their whim to the Foundation for Excellence, which is not a very excellent thing at all, really. So the question then arises, even if you have progressive commissioners who are they're restrained. They are restrained by what is going to be allowed by the billionaires of Kalamazoo. And if you are even tangentially aware of that reality, yeah, the pitch to go out there and vote may seem like a bridge too far. Why should I walk a couple blocks down the street when, you know, at the end of the day, the city belongs to the Bills? So, um, something worth thinking about. And while I don't want everybody to necessarily despair with that, because we should remember, no matter, the billionaires with their billions are still vulnerable to public opinion and public pushback. And something I would always say is like real democracy in the city is real and it's attainable and it is enforceable, but it has to be enforced by the people. And that does mean we have to get more involved and pay more attention to local politics. And we have to organize around that. And I know we see what's going on at the federal level and the onset of, insane casino fascism. But building the resilient kinds of communities that we are going to need to fight back against that, again, starts at the block level. And if we aren't keeping the eye on the democracy ball here in Kalamazoo, we are going to be left defenseless as things continue to ratchet up. And then I would also just kind of close that by saying, when I really talk about direct democracy, I'm not necessarily even talking about voting. I'm talking about organizing your workplace. I'm talking about building that capacity. So it won't be the capitalists of this town threatening capital flight. It won't be them holding their money over us. It can be us saying, this those factories downtown, those restaurants, et cetera, we're going to put our hands in our pockets until the city does what the people of Kalamazoo want. And that is possible. That is within our reach. But we have to educate, we have to agitate, and we have to organize. So anyway, I will link to in the show notes some of the more detailed election results. I know. Often we kind of go through and kind of do like how did the working class neighborhoods vote, and I may do that actually at a later date. I reserve my right to get nerdy and into the numbers, but if you would like to look at them yourself, feel free. We will link to that in the show notes. You can find that at the Kalamazoo County website. Well, we're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Well, from talking a little bit about the local elections, I want to transition into some statewide stories. And both of these next two stories we're going to talk about are centered on Palestinian solidarity here in the state of Michigan. And I want to start over, our neighbors to the east over in Ann Arbor. An article about some goings on over at the University of Michigan. This comes to us from Michigan Advance. It is an article from Scott Greer and Julie Boland. Is the University of Michigan is censoring a quilt? Question mark. It's published on November 12th. Going to be reading from this for a little bit. If you explore the Michigan Union and Ann Arbor, go upstairs and find the opera room, you might see a quilt. It is the work by Toby Millman, a University of Michigan faculty member and alum, and was commissioned by the University of Michigan Arts Initiative. It is part of a larger exhibit called Visual History of the Unions. The exhibit was supposed to open on October 16th, with the various pieces displayed in high traffic areas on the ground floor. Instead, the quilt and most of the other artworks in the exhibition are in an obscure room that opened on November 6th for 6 weeks only. Why? Well, the title of the applique quilt is a tip-off. Tahrir Coalition, March 28, 2024. It shows a group of students gathered in the Union with Palestinian flags protesting the genocide being conducted in Gaza with the support of the United States. It is unclear who made the decision to delay, relocate, and shorten the time frame for the exhibition. It could have been a staff member in charge of the University of Michigan unions or some higher level administrator, but relocated it was. The story of that quilt is telling. Regardless of what you think about Israel or international law or student activists or quilt art, it is a story of obedience in advance by administrators, of looking around for people who might stifle free speech at the University of Michigan and giving them what they want before they ask for it. And therefore, of the moral collapse, in historian Ruth Ben Guyet's words, that enables the loss of a democracy. That's an awfully heavy message to fold into a quilt, no? Well, the quilt is only an issue because a university administrator decided to make it an issue. And as likely as not, that decision was taken out of fear of outside forces. The evidence is in a genuinely shocking new report. The American Association of University Professors and the Middle East Studies Association just released their research on the weaponization of civil rights law to stifle speech and debate on campus. It's amazing. It documents a surge of civil rights investigations since 2023, overwhelmingly focused on speech rather than traditional civil rights complaints such as sexual or racial discrimination. These actions are in response to reports that make it clear that criticism of Israeli policy rather than anti Semitism is the focus. All but one of the 102 anti Semitism complaint letters we have analyzed focus on speech critical of Israel. Of these, 79% contain allegations of anti Semitism that simply describe criticisms of Israel or Zionism with no references to Jews or Judaism, and at least 50% of complaints consist solely of such criticism. It is legitimate to debate the relationship of Judaism and Zionism, but this is a bare knuckle fight, not a debate about identity and ideology. And finally, efforts to chill campus discussion of the Middle East are part of a broader political agenda. The report finds that 78% of complaints were from right wing advocacy organizations, including some with no campus presence. And at least 24% of investigations were opened based on complaints by actors with no connection to the school. In fact, at least 15 investigations were opened based on complaints from a single conservative activist with no relation to any of the schools investigated. The fear on American college campuses being driven from the outside. Outside agitators are at work all right, but they are overwhelmingly on the side of repression and coordination with the Trump administration. And again, this is kind of an example of that. It is projection. You have these organic movements that crop up across college campuses. Students seeing a genocide live streamed on their phones. And of course, the first thing, you have people in the Republican Party talk about radical Hamas agents are going in and spreading propaganda on campuses, or Democrats like Nancy Pelosi saying it's the result of Russian internet trolls. When no, actually, it is just a very natural response to seeing war crimes unfold, and the people who run the world do nothing about it. I also wanted to point out too, the whole thing about like outside agitators. We've had there's literally been kind of like brown shirt thugs. I think notoriously this happened over at UCLA. Just descend on these student encampments when they get away scot free, but trumped up charges, no pun intended, are uh, being made against these student activists, including right here in Michigan under Attorney General Dana Nessel. And again, it is also just to point out a little bit of irony. If you go back about 10 years, the right wing media was making a lot of hay about, oh, free speech on campus is under attack. You can't say mostly racist things on campus without being canceled. Oh no. And they say that on one side of their mouth, and then the other side, they are trying to get students expelled, harassed, to get professors fired for calling a spade, calling the genocide a genocide at the behest of a powerful foreign government. So again, kind of pointing out all of those things as we kind of move. I'm going to read a little bit more from this article. Professor Jane Hong of the University of Michigan at the annual Davis Market and Nickerson Lecture in the honor of the fight for free speech of Michigan spoke to the way fear works in a university. Excuse me. When free speakers rapidly learned the art of self-censorship, she noted that the university didn't impose it. Outside forces in government and their allies in society did the work. Going on to say, the threat to American democracy is an increasingly unpopular president with a thin electoral victory, who has been repeatedly repudiated by both the overwhelming majority of federal courts and the voters who had elections this month. Put another way, there are far more people who like American democracy than people are willing to sacrifice it. If every little action taken by anti-democratic forces and those they cow is challenged, then over time they will be overwhelmed. And you can read the article for yourself um, over at Michigan Advance. Scott L. Greer is a professor of health management and policy and global public health and political science over at U of M. And Julie E. Bolland is a professor of psychology and linguistics and president of the University of Ann Arbor. University of Michigan Ann Arbor chapter of the American Association of University Professors. So you can find that on Michigan Advance. We will link to that article for you to read for yourselves. Moving from Ann Arbor to the representative out of Detroit, Miss Rashida Tlaib, they recently introduced a resolution to formally recognize what has happened in Gaza as a genocide, and to continue to call for an arms embargo. This is an article written by Sharon Zhang on Truth Out. It's published on November 14th. Representative Rashida Tlaib introduced legislation on Friday to recognize Israel's genocide of Palestinian people in Gaza and call for the U.S. to take concrete actions like an arms embargo to end the ongoing slaughter. The Israeli government's genocide in Gaza has not ended, and it will not end until we act, said Tlaib, the only Palestinian American in Congress. The resolution, introduced with 20 co-sponsors in the House, formally recognizes that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. It raises the United States' obligations as a party to the UN Genocide Convention to end military assistance to Israel, ensure compliance with proceedings against Israel and Israeli officials in The Hague, and lifts the U.S.'s sanctions against the International Criminal Court. The resolution calls for the U.S. to implement targeted sanctions on Israel and organizations and individuals involved in or enabling the genocide. It also calls for the investigation and prosecution of U.S. officials complicit in the genocide. And that would be a lot of people, man, to actually be able to get that through. Impunity only enables more atrocity. As our government continues to send a blank check for war crimes and ethnic cleansing, Palestinian children's smiles are extinguished by bombs and bullets are made in the USA, Tlaib said. To end this horror, we must reject genocide denial and follow our binding legal obligations under the Genocide Convention to take immediate action to pursue justice and accountability to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. Co-sponsors of Tlaib's legislation include figures like Representative Greg Cesar from Texas, head of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, as well as other left-leaning lawmakers like Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The resolution cites numerous expert groups that have labeled the assault a genocide, including the UN Commission of Inquiry in a report in September, and the International Association of Genocide Scholars, the world's leading group on the subject, in a declaration the same month. Over 2 years into Israel's assault, very few members of Congress have identified Israel's assault as a genocide, despite a deluge of evidence of Israel's indiscriminate slaughter. The United States' complicity in the genocide has been well documented, and the majority of U.S. voters, including 77% of Democrats, say that Israel is committing a genocide. Tlaib's resolution has been endorsed by over 100 organizations, including human rights groups like Amnesty International USA, left-wing groups like the Democratic Socialists of America, Muslim and Arab rights groups, and the International Association of Genocide Scholars. Human rights lawyer and activist Nora Erakat spoke out in favor of the resolution. The United States has used its role as a global superpower to undermine the international legal order and its constitutive instruments in order to facilitate Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza, and now to impose a framework for permanent occupation of the Gaza Strip. Failure to recognize the genocide by its name and to achieve accountability for its Palestinian survivors exposes the entire world to cruel forms of unadulterated state violence. You can read that article for yourself at Truth Out. It's written by Sharon Zhang. Headline, Tlaib introduced resolution to recognize Gaza genocide, calls for arms embargo. We're going to take another quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Well, at the top of the hour, I'm going to be joined by my co-host Lawrence. We're going to dig a little bit more into some of the really big national stories that I know, yeah, some of y'all are eager to hear me talk about. I got a message from a friend slash fan of the show. He was like, I can't wait to dig into the madness. Good Lord. But before that, I want to talk a little bit more about what's going on here in Michigan. And there's this article from Bridge, Michigan that caught my eye about some stuff going on in the Michigan education system. Actually, before that, and like both of these stories are kind of good news, but I forgot to mention back, taking it back to Kalamazoo, the last big issue that we talked about before our break last week, we had friend on the show to talk about the Asylum Lake Preserve, and they're trying to develop it again, rezone it again, and there was the city commission meeting, the zoning meeting, which took place on, I believe it was November 6th. Hundreds of people, like over 100 people showed up to express their dissatisfaction with the idea of rezoning that property commercial. Ended up being voted down unanimously by the zoning commission. It was an incredible example of, we were talking about at the top of the show, democracy in action. It means actual people engaging with the issues in their community. That was a beautiful example of that. And once again, the uh, the residents of Kalamazoo have prevented Paradise from being paved over with a parking lot or a car wash or a strip mall or whatever the heck else they want to put there. But that does not mean that again the struggle is not over. There is going to be a public hearing on December 15th coming up, where the city commission is going to consider the case and take action. And while it is likely they will listen to the zoning recommendation, and it would be very out of, I'd say left field, right field, I guess, for them to, supersede that, especially with some of the more progressive folks who just got on the commission. But they are still asking people to come out. That is, folks working on the Asylum Lake preservation and those efforts. There is a call to action about attending the December 15th meeting and using your voice to express your sentiments on this issue, which has worked. You know, we can despair with it has worked to protect Asylum Lake thus far. And while I think a lot of discussion is how do we safeguard the preserve in the future, because it's kind of like that SpongeBob meme. This guy keeps coming back again and again and again and again to try to rezone for his stupid car wash, and it's like, how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? So there's some conversations about how are we going to move forward without having to just show up every couple of years to prevent this car wash guy from ruining Asylum Lake. Um, and there has been talk about trying to pressure the city into, putting out an offer to buy the land and that sort of thing. Those discussions are going on. And it's worth being part of those conversations. People in your networks talking about Asylum Lake, and I love going to Asylum Lake. I proposed to my wife there. It's beautiful, and as they said during the citizen comments, you don't want to show like I don't want to show my kids where my husband proposed, only to be in the shadow of a strip mall or a car wash or some nonsense like that. So anyway, that was a win, but the struggle continues, and it will continue until I guess the people can get that land away from that developer. So we will keep you posted on that issue as it hopefully just keeps coming back like a slasher villain. The other issue again here in Michigan that is a bit of a win. It kind of relates more to the culture wars. And you may remember a few years ago, we were running a lot of stories about the ascendance of groups like Moms for Liberty and these kind of dingbat conservative activists into, um, you know, boards of, state boards of education and, again, school boards and that kind of thing. And it does look like the tide is turning against that. People are getting tired of these people and their bigoted nonsense. And I think that's reflected in this national story about Michigan is going to adopt updated sex education standards that talk about LGBTQ plus issues, trans issues, etc. This is written by Isabel Lohman. It's published on November 13th. I'm going to read a little bit from the article and then give you some of my take on it. The Michigan State Board of Education approved revised state health education standards Thursday that include recommendations that students be taught about gender identity and sexual orientation. Proponents of the standards say they are age appropriate and will help LGBTQ plus students understand themselves. Opponents say the standards undermine parental choice and religious liberties protections. More than 100 people signed up to speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, either in person or online, prompting the board to limit each person to 1 minute instead of the usual 3 minutes. Some people waved small pride flags during public comment. The state also had extra rooms available to hold those wishing to speak. The board voted 6-2 on approving the Michigan Health Education Standards guidelines. Members made the decision after roughly 2 hours and 40 minutes of public comments, which were split between those in favor of the guidelines and those that opposed them. I just do want to say, like, again, this argument that keeps going back to parental choice and et cetera, et cetera. Look, if you want to try to impose your bigotry on your children, I guess that is technically your business. And the thing is, the current law allows for that. So again, they're lying about what they're even mad about. Michigan sex education standards currently are an opt-out model. Parents can choose to opt their students out of sex education. That has not changed. That has remained the same. It's as much ado about nothing. It is, again, these conservative activists coming in, trying to not even quote unquote protect their own kids from indoctrination or whatever they want to call it. They are trying they are trying to supersede the rights of other parents who maybe want to raise their children not to be queer phobic buttheads. you know, again, they're trying to take the rights away from those parents to have an education that is more inclusive. And again, this does help students. Suicide rates among trans kids and kids with non-hetero gender identities are higher than those hetero kids. And again, the right wing will cynically point to these and talk and try to illustrate some sort of like mental failing that leads to that. And of course, most studies have panned out. No, it's because of bullying and queer phobia in our society. It's external factors that make these kids feel bad about themselves. Um, Anyway, to kind of quote some other folks who spoke at the meeting, young people in Gen Z and the community that you serve are calling for comprehensive and inclusive sex eds and standards, said Brianna Bryant of Detroit. Um, and going on, I thought this particular comment was very insightful. Stella Shananaquet told the board she supports the standards. Deniers lost the bathroom wars. So here we are again with it wearing a different dress. Nobody's teaching your kids gender identity. They already know. They're just too scared to tell you about it. The bottom line is you don't have to believe in it. You don't have to accept it, but it exists. And again, this kind of goes down to the root of conservative thinking around gender is that it's made up. It's this thing that trans people just showed up yesterday. And of course, there's a historical reason people think that. You go back to some of the earliest Nazi book burnings were studies about transgender folks, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, people, gay folks, queer folks have always existed. It's just only been in the last 30, 40 years that people could actually be open about it without fear of violence, bullying, ostracization, etc. And that's what a lot of this is about. They're trying to rewind the clock when it was well and okay to bully trans and queer people. Um, Again, it's part of the whole. Where these culture wars get down to is they try to exploit people's existing prejudices so that they will punch down instead of punch up, so that they will get mad at people for living their lives rather than get mad at the ruling class for having a system that's going to, for example, cause all of our health insurance rates to skyrocket in the next couple of months, or try to starve people out from access to food stamps, for example. And again, I do just want to point out that Michigan has a model where, at the end of the day, they can opt out of this stuff. So again, it really is about trying to force other parents and other students to stay in the closet, and that's really what this whole debate is all about. But as I mentioned, it did this new sex education standard passed, and that it will be implemented across the Michigan school system, which is a lot because again there was a sense of kind of a sense of defeat, a kind of inevitability. Just there was so much money and power behind the agenda of the last couple of years is trying to, paint queer folks as like predators and aberrations, etc. That again, the it seems like we're course correcting a little bit, and the people with common sense are telling the bigots to buzz off, so to speak. So you can find that article on Bridge, Michigan. It's written by Isabel Lohman, published on November 13th. Michigan adopts updated sex education standards after contentious meeting. We will link to that in the show notes. So we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk a little bit more about what has been going on at the national level. Keep it locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your source for political revolution and talk. Joined by my co-host Lawrence now. Lawrence, how you doing today?
Oh man, I'm good, man. How are you?
Oh, just lovely. It's a bit of a glum day out. It's been a crazy couple of weeks in American politics. What I say is like, well, I always knew the ruling class was a bit of a circle jerk, but I know that's never.
Man, man,
But
there's
yeah,
there's a lot in that you
yeah.
just said, bro.
Well, we'll get to that. I think we should probably rewind a bit because our last show was right before it was the day of the elections, which had a pretty seismic impact on at least how people
Oh
viewed
man,
politics for the next
yeah,
few
we
days
haven't
afterwards.
talked since the election.
No,
Jesus,
yeah.
man, the things that have been happening, the cope around the world, and everything with Epstein that's been happening. Um, Yeah, there's so much news that we need to talk about.
Mhm. I think, obviously the big thing, and I'm wearing my little socialist shirt right now. I want to talk a little bit about the implications of, you don't mess with the Zohran. He won. He won in a landslide. He won in a landslide in one of the biggest cities on the planet. And I know like a lot of left podcasters kind of talk this to death, but I do want to say like it genuinely it is a really good. I mean, it's some good news. It was good to see, especially in these really bleak times. Not even so much Zoran himself, although he's got some really good policies, but what that represents. It represents the the American the potential people feeling like there is the potential to hope again, that there can be positive change, rather than just having to pick the least bad option every time. And I think it shows that socialism. I think a friend of mine said this. I'm going to paraphrase it. Socialism is not going away. The working class is increasingly agitated by everything that's been going on under again Trump, throwing the austerity lever, but before then as well. The US empire has been on a bit of a downward trajectory for a minute, and I think this renews my sense of hope, that we can converge around politics of hope, around working class solidarity. That is still a very real thing on the horizon, despite the fact that like we've seen a lot of our movements defeated in the electoral arena over there, despite the fact that we've had some representatives kind of move on up there and do some disappointing things, but it speaks to again the power of the working class to be its own agent of change. And whatever takeaway you have from it, I think that's something that you should put in your calculus and think of it again. It is some good news in what has been some pretty bleak times as of late.
Yeah, yeah, that election a couple weeks ago, yeah, it was a landslide. Like Zoran won, a bunch of moderate Democrats also won. Democrats that was that was one of the biggest electoral wins for left wing politics. Even Prop 50 in California, when Texas said they wanted to redistrict so they could give Republicans more seats, California said, "Oh, if y'all want to cheat, we'll cheat too."
Yeah, fire
Like
with fire. How's that?
Democrats, Democrats, Democratic voters did the thing that Democratic politicians always cry about, that of what citizens should do. Use use your vote to communicate what you want the agenda to be and what you want our country to do moving forward. The Democratic voters did that in droves. They did that overwhelmingly so. And then the Democrats folded on the shutdown fight next a few days later. Like
Hmm.
the roller coaster of emotions over the last few weeks have been insane. But yes, I want to focus on the fact that yeah, Zoran won, other progressives have won, and the Democratic establishment has done everything that they can to disavow and not acknowledge them, at the same time propping up moderate Democrats, the same ones that will vote against raising the minimum wage, the same ones that helped Republicans with their agenda. And that's the thing that over the last few weeks has really been pissing me off lately. It's been grinding my gears. Is that we see what the country wants. The most popular politician right now in our body politics is Zoran. Is Zoran, right? And we have our own version of Zoran in Michigan. Abdul Al Sayed, he's
Hmm.
running. We need to support him. Every time we come on this program, we need to shout out Abdul. We need to get him actually on our show. We're gonna have to work on that. But yeah, it makes me angry when I'm like, the Democratic voters clearly have said, we need y'all fighting back against this regime. We need y'all fighting back to protect us. And the Democratic establishment was like, nah, y'all good. Thanks for the votes, though.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it is. Uh, snatching vict or defeat from the jaws of victory might be like uh,
Yeah, man.
dramatic way to put it, but that 180, just the complete whiplash of this, again, the Democrats scoring up some of the best numbers they've had in an election in years, and then the next week, that cast of, I think, like 7 or 8 rotating villains who are going to concede at the worst possible moment when the wind is at their back, when most of the American public is blaming rightfully the Trump administration for the shutdown, despite their best efforts to propagandize about it. And yeah, it boggles the mind. And like, it is worth saying,
And
like,
they settled they settled for a go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, it's just it boggles the mind because this that while it's true, a lot of people were getting hurt by the shutdown, and their argument is like, well, we just we weren't going to get the concession, and we just needed to bring the shutdown to a close, blah blah blah. And again, it's just there's no appetite for again, trying to use some very basic political jujitsu to put that pressure on the Republicans in Congress and the Trump administration. It's only and from what I've heard, one of the reasons that they voted on this is like, well, we're gonna let the Republicans vote on it, and when they decide to increase everybody's healthcare premiums, we can use that in the midterms next year, which again, like. there's not really. Is there a guarantee there's going to be fair, free and fair midterms? Not necessarily. We're in a pretty dire situation here, but also the idea that you are going to leverage the pain of the electorate to try to score political points is gross. And especially when you didn't need to do that. You already had this public opinion at your back against the Republicans, again for the shutdown. Um, this whole idea that you could use that against them in the future is it's it shows the difference between politicians who play politics like a game and people who do it to try to help people. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah.
dog. Like the thing that so yes, I co-sign all that, and also the other thing that makes it so egregious or so upsetting for me is that this is where they cave while the Republicans are going through their own civil war right now, right?
Mhm.
Um, uh, this is we talked about it before. Uh, we talked about how the brown shirts, Trump's brown shirts, and we were saying it as like we were saying it as a metaphor for the alt right neo-Nazi uh portion of the Republican base that's now getting much more radicalized and getting much more prominent and mainstream now, and it's becoming normalized to be this way, right? We talked about the Proud Boys, talked about the Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, Oath Keepers, and things of that nature. But the Grapers, these are the Nick Fuentes style supporters are fighting the neocons. They're fighting the old guard or the current establishment of the Republicans, and people are now seeing are we are we've been at the point where people now for the last year have got to the we are finding out we're finding out why you don't elect Republicans, right? Because Republicans literally ruin everything that they're touching, right? And so I want us to stay encouraged because of the election. So there's two things. I want us to stay encouraged because of the election. Now we see that people like Schumer and the and centrist wing of the party, which I hate. I despise when people now are calling themselves centrists or moderates. No, I'm like, no, you're just a Republican. You're a coward. You're just a Republican. You're a coward. You don't want to be called a Republican because you understand that brand sucks.
You find a lot of that on
But
dating apps. Yeah, the ladies, here's a
yeah,
pro tip. If a guy says he's not into politics, that means he probably like supports
that
ICE or
means
something.
that means
That's-
that means he is that means he is a right winger, but he doesn't want the label because he's a coward. That's what that
Mhm.
means. Um. So yes, and you see it with the response since then, since the Democrats caved and they got a promise. They got a promise that the vote will come up. They didn't get a promise that
Legislate.
they would get. Yeah, they didn't get a promise that the vote will pass the House. They got a promise that next month the House of Representatives will bring a vote up to maintain the not just the Affordable Care Act subsidies, but food stamps, the furloughed workers who weren't getting paid during the shutdown, um, paying them back, uh, the funds that has already been allocated to going to blue states that they're holding up. It was a number of things that the shutdown, the funding needing to go back to the going back to states for the shutdown that they caved on. Now, and I get real people are hurting, but they were hurting because they understood that the Republicans were the reasons why children were going hungry, why healthcare was going up, all at the same time that the president was throwing a great Gatsby party, fish and chips party at the White House with mega donors,
Mhm. You really can't
right?
get much more like let them eat cake than that. Good Lord. This is
No, it's the it's worse than that, bro. It's not even let them eat cake. It's let them eat ballroom. Let them eat
mm,
Epstein
yeah.
ballroom. That's what it was.
Like, why would I give them cake? They're poor. That's
Right?
basically-
Why
uh,
they can't afford it? They don't get it, right?
yeah, mhm.
But so yeah, and you see it with even the View, and other like very very centrist neoliberal stations were calling for Chuck Schumer to shut down. Shout out to Rokana and others are like, nah, Schumer has to
Yeah.
step down
hmm
because
But yeah, that
because
was pretty interesting
either
because like usually like the progress you see that from the progressive wing of the party, but even like just dyed in the wool like more center left liberals were like, get him out of here, get that old man out of here. And I was
yeah
like, wow,
yeah
okay, but
it's not just him, it's him, Fetterman, all of them, because either two things are a possibility. Either Schumer did not know that 8 Democrats were going to cave, and these just so happen to be 8 Democrats that are not for reelection until 2028, or they're not seeking their seat again. So this vote will not negatively affect them. Or Schumer is an incompetent leader that can't keep the party together, or which is what multiple stories, drop site news, and Axios has reported. Schumer was in communication the entire time with them. People like John Ossoff and others also wanted to cave, but they couldn't. Right. So either Schumer was mad incompetent, or he was placating them and saying, "Hey, man, I'm not going to vote for it, but y'all can vote for it on my behalf," which is what
yeah,
happened.
I think it was Tim Kaine who said it's like, oh well, there were a lot of other Democrats who were happy we voted the way we did. It's almost like, yeah, like I said at the top, I referred to the rotating villain, which is something we see whenever Democrats are in a position of power or even have leverage. There's usually like one, two, in this case, seven, who will vote against something that is, popular across the board for the party. Kristen Sinema, who's the guy from
Joe
West Virginia?
Manchin,
Joe Manchin. I'm having a brain
Joe,
fart. Yeah, Joe
Doug,
Manchin.
when
20
when
years
when it came
ago, it was
to
Joe Lieberman, who was the big. We were going to have something a little bit better than Obamacare, and he was kind of the stopgap on that. So yeah, it's a recurring thing where there's always just enough votes in the Democratic caucus to prevent good things from happening.
this is the reason. No, so this is. I know we gotta get to other topics, but this is my speculation. This is my speculation on why they did it. When the Republicans said that they were going to nuke the filibuster to get their agenda through, the Democrats decided to fold. That's when the Democrats decided to fold.
hmm
Why? It's because
I'm glad you brought that up. I think a lot of people don't know
because yeah, the reason why is because the filibuster historically has always been used to stop progress, especially when it comes to the proletariat and the people. When it comes to stopping progress for positively for the working class. When it was created, it was a process to stop anti-lynching laws. So that was what it was originally for, to stop progress, positive progress for Black people in America. Now it's stopped. Now it's a weapon to use for all progress in America. The Democrats don't want to do anything in the Senate. They don't want to do anything in the House and do anything in the Senate. And it's not like they haven't nuked the filibuster before. They have, when the stock market was crashing, or or the cap needs interest rates need to be lifted and stuff, or the debt ceiling fight, they have no problem nuking the filibusters in, but they will always use it when it comes to things like raising the minimum wage, when it comes to universal health care, things that will positively affect uh, uh, your average American. They will use filibuster. They will use filibuster, the parliamentarian. They will use every excuse in the book not to do it. And that's my speculation. That's what I think that why the Democrats was like, all right, we will cave now because if y'all get rid of the filibuster, then we don't have an excuse. We don't have an excuse
Mhm.
when we take back the House, the Senate, the White House, and we have a Democratic president that wants to stack the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Trying
yeah,
to think, there is maybe it was Jackman. I think they wrote an article that kind of went into some depth on that. But if
yeah.
I find
Shout
it,
out
I'll
to
put it in the show
Jacobin.
notes. Yeah.
Jacobin's been on fire these
Mhm.
last few weeks. Yeah, shout out to Jacobin. Shout out to Democracy Now. Shout out to Drop Site News. Shout out to the Lever.
Ooh, yeah.
There's been a lot of people out here doing the Lord's work right
Mhm.
now.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about draft. I mean, if we're ready to move on to the next story, we're going to talk a little bit more about drop site. But, are we ready to move on to the this
Oh
has been eating
man,
up everybody?
the
Um, we've
last
been
last the
gobbling up
last
our
weekend,
attention. It's been
this last week,
it's a
this
mouthful.
last week, this weekend. Okay, so I
Oh
mean,
God.
we have to talk.
Yeah,
We have to
yeah.
talk about it. It's been
Mhm.
all over social media. It's it's been all over the news. Okay, so I forgot the lady's name. She got voted into the House of Representatives, right?
Mhm.
Um, so the House of Representatives has enough votes to release documents from the Epstein files. Um, I think her name was Raul Grajava. I think she was the last vote.
Yeah. Hmm.
So Trump. So this is the thing that makes it funny. MAGA and Trump have been doing everything in their power to not release the Epstein files. They've been doing everything in their power to say that we can't do this. That there's no reason to talk about it. You saw Trump talking about we're still talking about Epstein. No one cares about him. And Miss Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, is now in Club Fed, basically the best
Yeah.
of the best of prisons. Uh, basically getting 5-star meals and playing with puppies and stuff. Like she's getting the treatment of the best treatment you can get while in prison. And everybody's like, you're Trump and the Republican Party is moving very guilty for people who say there's nothing in the Epstein files, right?
Hmm.
So some of the documents, over 200, I think it was 20,000 of them emails have been released to the public, and they're not the actual Epstein emails. They're not this. They're just the stuff that was at the house when they raided the island, right? These are just those things. These are not the actual Epstein emails. And Trump's name shows up in those emails over 1,500 times. Over 1,000. It was like I think it was 1,000. It
1,005.
was one. No, I think the number that Dropsite reported was like 1,674.
He's not just,
Um,
he's in those files.
yeah,
Epstein is in
yeah,
the Trump
it's
files. Is that
yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and there's a lot of things that had people have been pointing out about how there are Democrats that are in there. How during committee hearings when when Epstein was still alive, Epstein was texting a Democratic representative and giving her questions that she should be asking uh, Trump staff and associates during the hearing. So he was saying, "Yo," and he was saying during the emails, "Hey, uh, I have things that can harm Trump. We should harm Trump. Maybe we can get leverage on him. And it basically shows that Trump and MAGA and Democrats, a lot of them were compromised by Epstein. And it also showed a lot of Epstein's ties to Mossad, to Israel, to
Mhm.
other foreign entities like Russia, and that he was a power broker that got dirt on a lot of people,
I
right?
just want to interject real quick.
Mhm.
That's probably the single biggest piece of the story that you're not seeing talked about a lot in the
Yeah,
mainstream media, particularly as we're really finding out through these emails. He was a straight up like intelligence asset for Israel, and I would really recommend people check out the series from Drop Site News about that because they really go into the weeds on this. But he was having
yeah,
intelligence operatives staying over at his house. He was engaging in these kind of blackmail intelligence games that are straight up from the Mossad playbook. The way that they
yeah.
try to like,
A lot of honeypot traps. A lot of
mhm,
honeypot traps.
yeah, hmm
Yeah, and also, yeah. Shout out to Ryan Grimm. Ryan Grimm, who you can also see on Breaking Points. Even though Breaking Points basically has what was it? Sagar and Jetty, who's basically right brown skin Tucker Carlson. Um, but he's counterbalanced by Crystal Ball, who's an actual progressive, and yeah, like that. It's a good show if you want to see both both perspectives from the right and the left. Uh, it's hard to watch sometimes, but yeah, Ryan Grimm, awesome, awesome reporting. He's doing the Lord's work out here. But also, the thing that makes it angry for me is that we were told by Cash Patel, remember, because Cash Patel was a podcaster before he became the head of the FBI. He was taught in a number of MAGA staffers and loyalists and people who talked about Epstein that they were going to release the files. They're going to be transparent. Ghislaine was telling the truth when she did her deposition. No, um, Trump wasn't in there, and there's no connection to Epstein. It was just one guy. That's da. And the information that we got so far has proven all that's BS. All of it's a lie. And-
hmm
and- it's all a lie. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. And that Trump was like Trump met up with Epstein. I think a month. Met up with Prince Andrews and connected with Epstein. I think a month or two before he passed away. That was also in these troves. That uh, Trump knew what Epstein was doing. He was at Epstein's house with one of the victims. It's it said very specifically Trump knew about the girls. He was at the house for hours with one of the victims.
yeah.
So 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 and this is the thing. MAGA already knew the thing, but this is the thing that made me laugh and why we've been laughing over all weekend is because there's a very particular email about Epstein's brother sent to Epstein about and asking him, "Hey, can you ask Putin if he still has those pictures, the pictures of Donnie blowing Bubba, right?"
Yeah.
So here's the thing: the internet over the weekend was internet. Okay,
On fire, yes.
and
The memes at a rapid clip.
the internet always wins. So the internet started to assume that Bubba was Bill Clinton because of Bill Clinton's connection to Epstein.
Popular
Uh,
nickname for the president back in the 90s, especially.
yeah, yeah. People also started to point out that Ghislaine has a horse or had a horse named Bubba. There was there,
I did not have
the,
sexual relations with that man. Sorry.
so
As a
The internet decided to internet. They started calling Donnie the Throatus Goatus POTUS. They 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 started the internet started nicknaming him Donnie Sacks. So like dog, I'm just like it was it's been it's been you want to talk about laughing. You want to talk about laughing through the pain. This
yeah.
weekend, the internet was interneting, bro. And MAGA, and this is when we talk about the civil rights, the Civil War. Nick Fuentes and others. You a lot of social media people, a lot of MAGA supporters were online burning their hats,
True.
and
Yeah.
and going from a red hat to a blue hat, saying America first, right?
And it's not
Because
just anecdotal. Some very recent polling shows that Trump has lost a lot of the recent dips in his approval rating comes from his own base, Republicans. So yeah, this we are actually starting to see the coalition and the cult fracture a little bit.
yeah,
Because
it
again,
is.
coming on the
Yeah,
tail of the
yeah.
shutdown, and then this drops at the worst possible time for the Trump administration.
And
Um,
this is the thing that makes me that make that to bring me back to reality that made me the most angry about that made me angry, even though we've been laughing about this, right? Trump's had 29 accusers accuse him of misconduct. His wife, ex-wife, who passed away, wrote in the books about how he sexually assaulted her. Right?
he's been convicted in court
We
of
Yeah, he's been convicted in court. He has 90 he had 93 felonies. Um he's already ruined our economy once. He we, the longest government shutdown before this recent one was under his first administration. He has polled as being the worst president in modern American history the first time. And now he's the worst president under modern American history the second time. All of those things didn't stop MAGA from keeping him at 36% in approval, which is still low, the lowest he's been. And they still chose to support him because they still saw themselves in Trump. And the thing that made them be like, nah, dog, we're done with this. We're done with this. Is imagining Trump being a bottom with Bill Clinton.
I
Trump,
mean, you're joking, but like it really, it is like there's that meme from Parks and Rec. It's like, well, I can excuse pedophilia, but I draw the line at gay stuff. Like, are you kidding
right?
me? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
and
You want to know the thing that also makes
yeah.
it crazy? I'm sorry to interrupt. The thing
Oh,
that
go
also
ahead,
makes
dude.
this crazy. No, the thing that also makes this crazy is that we joked during the campaign about how JD Vance likes to go 50 Shades of Grey on IKEA couches. Um, that looks normal in comparison.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, dude.
like, like, you know what I'm saying? Ashley, JD Vance, uh, JD Vance, you know what I'm saying? Humping couches, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I want to
is
go back
is
to man.
yeah, it's normal in
Yeah.
comparison. It's normal in comparison
Yeah.
to the argue to the logic or to the idea that yeah, Trump is it's not that Trump isn't a predator. The 13-year-old that him and Epstein both assaulted in Florida, that's still a real story. That's still a real thing. So it's not. This is a man that bragged about um when he had the Miss Teen Universe pageants and stuff, walking into the dressing rooms when they were getting dressed. These are 14, 15-year-olds, and he would walk in on them like he bragged about these things. So it's not like we haven't heard him confess horrific behavior already. But the thing is, I think the thing is, and goes back to the psychology of MAGA, people projected themselves onto Trump. They
Hmm.
projected the thought of, oh man, I can be rich like Donald Trump. You know, I can be successful like Donald Trump. I can have girls want me like Donald Trump. And now they have to deal with the reality that, you know, the big beautiful bill has a whole new meaning.
Yeah, and it's like you really think about it, like so much about with Donald Trump and what MAGA does. They really project their aspirations towards hyper masculinity on the Trump. Have you ever seen those AI images where he's like all swole and he's got a rifle and
Yeah,
there's an eagle and all
yeah.
that stuff? Like this hits like a real emotional core for these people. Again, most of us look at that to see it was ridiculous, but that's very real. And I would also reference, go back, listen to our episode about Jesus and John Wayne. A lot of that psychology plays into it. The idea of like a Christian warrior. And all of that falls apart when you have confirmation, which, by the way, part of the reason the story keeps having legs, Mark Epstein, the press reached out to him. And Mark Epstein, he clarified. He didn't say this is made up, this is phony, blah, blah, blah. He said, it's like, well, that wasn't a reference to Bill Clinton. Somebody named Bubba got blown by the president.
Right.
And yeah, it makes all of that fall apart if the president is engaging in not just like, oh, there's grass on the field, play ball, which is a sentiment you've heard from people like Megyn Kelly.
Oh
But
yeah. Wait. That is something we will talk about. That's the
Mhm.
next topic that we're gonna talk about right after this. Cause yeah, we'll go ahead.
But it's something about imagining Donald Trump in these kind of like gross, eyes wide shut, weird sex cabal games that has been part of their fevered imagination for years. And I want to stick on this point for just 1 second because it's something about the relationship between Trump and the Epstein files that I've never really quite been able to figure out is Trump knows he's implicated in these files. He's known this since forever, yet starting in 2016, he pumped up this idea, these conspiracy theories, Pizzagate, QAnon. He used these to pump himself up. It's like I am a defender. I am a defender of children. I like these ideas about me defending against this cabal, etc. Um, in his 2020 reelection, talking about I'm going to release the Epstein files. We're going to get all the groomers, etc. They built up like a key tenet of the MAGA religion is protecting the children from the elite pedophiles, and Donald used that. He fed into that, and I have always wondered, just like, why would you do that when you've got blood on your hands? Your hand is in the cookie jar. If this stuff ever gets out, you're ruined. And what finally made it click for me was when I was reading some of the prose in these emails. And back when the QAnon stuff was really heating up, so much of what they discussed are the code words and the spy games the elite do to get away with their crimes. Now, as it turns out, they don't do any of that stuff. Epstein, after his first indictment, was it's like, hey, I'm bringing some girls over this weekend. What's up? Come commit some sex crimes with me, yo. And what it is
He
the
did it
you.
on Gmail, bro.
Yes,
He
yeah.
did it on Gmail.
What I realized is it's not necessarily even stupidity. It is the hubris. When you are that rich and powerful, you literally think you can get away with anything. So I think with Trump, it's something very similar. He felt totally fine playing with this fire and using it to charge up his base because he believed he was never going to see any consequences from it. And now that the consequences are at his throat, seeing it play out very differently.
Doug, Doug, Doug.
Sorry.
Yes, no. I co-sign all that, but also remember, this is the same man that said I could shoot somebody on Fifth Ave and get away with it. And so He told you his mindset. I'm untouchable. I'm Teflon. Teflon Don, right? Teflon Don did a 180 on these files, right? He tried to get Lauren Boebert. He took Lauren Boebert and some other Republicans to the Situation Room to get them to not vote to release the Epstein files. He realized that he was going to lose the vote. Now he tries to get ahead of it, saying, "Hey, I wanted them to release the files anyway." And now, and because it's been reported that they're opening up a new investigation on Clinton and Larry Summers and others because they're also in the files. And because the FBI will be opening up a new investigation, and because it's an active investigation, the actual Epstein files will not be released. And it's a
Yeah.
way for them to delay again not releasing the actual Epstein files because the trove that was dropped, that was FOIA and stuff. That was FOIA requested and stuff. So we haven't even actually seen the actual files yet. This was the warm up. This was the appetizer. So that means because what does Trump normally do when he is dealing with an issue? He goes on the offensive. He goes on the offensive, right? Um, when he was talking about he said discussing things about women. He says only it was only Rosie O'Donnell. He talked about he used Palestinian as a slur during the campaign, right? He goes on the offensive. This man has done everything in his power to be like, hey, yo, we're not releasing these files and we're not doing anything of the sort. And the reason why, because I've been seeing it, as we brought it up, people like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and Nick Fuentes and others, some of them have been making excuses to justify child abuse. Megyn Kelly in particular, and this is the reason why I'm glad that you brought her up because I don't have kids. I want kids. You know what I'm saying. I'm getting I'm of age and I'm like I'm older in age, and it's still something that I would like to do right. But I have nieces and nephews around uh 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 uh, uh that are teenagers. And the thing that Megan Kelly said on her show, and this is the reason why we're bringing up, she was having a conversation with one of her guests, and she tried to make the excuse that an 8-year old and a 15-year-old are not the same or not the same when it comes to child abuse, when it comes to rape, right? And that Epstein liked girls that were closer to 15, not 8. So she was trying to downplay and she's trying to downplay the fact that they're minors. You know what? If you want to say a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old is different when it comes to them playing sports, okay, cool. I don't think an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old should be playing the same sport at the same time. You could say that. Maybe you're saying a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old is not the same when it comes to them knowing how to make pancakes. You know what? Valid critique. Have no problem with that. You know what? They're not the same when it comes to them racing each other. The 100-yard dash is probably going to be kind of hard for an 8-year-old compared to a 15-year-old that's done track before. You want to know what you can't say that about? Someone who is a predator who preys on minors because they're minors. Minors cannot consent. The reason why it bothered me so much that to see her say this outside the fact that she's a lawyer, she has a 14-year-old child. She has a 14-year-old child. By Megyn Kelly's own standards, the things that happened to her when she was at Fox News, Roger Ailes was actually a gentleman because Roger Ailes was only messing with adult women. He was assaulting adult women. By her logic, I hope and pray that her daughter never deals with a situation like she had. And I also hope and pray that if in the worst case scenario, if anything like that was to happen to her, she does not talk to her mama. She talks to
Yeah.
someone else. Because any person that downplay child sexual assault is not someone you should be dealing with or talking to.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about too, like a little bit why Megyn Kelly said that. I think it's important to kind of look at, okay, when that was made, you didn't really see that same argument appearing too much in conservative circles right after that, and it's because obviously it's a disgusting argument. But it was like it was being field tested because again, anybody who's paying attention to this, Fox News did an incredible job of trying to ignore this to the best of their ability, but there comes a point where it becomes impossible to ignore. And as we get more revelations of what Trump was actually up to with underage girls, you're trying to float this way to justify these things to his base. And I think even for a lot of those people who, again, go along with some like racist, sexist, homophobic stuff, that is a bridge too far, especially when, as I said earlier, you have made it a nigh religious tenet in this movement to protect the kids, protect the children. There is a cliff. People will not follow you after. And I think it was interesting that you didn't really see that field tested too much after that. They realized that does not land, that does not work. It's gross. And I think too, like we joked around a bit on the show about like we certainly did not have that on our bingo card about him blowing somebody, but
About Donald Trump and Nancy Reagan,
oh
game recognizing game,
yeah.
game recognizing game when it comes to Nancy Reagan and Donald Trump, right? You know what I'm
But
saying?
I think one of
You
them,
got two.
yeah, one of the more chilling revelations that came out of this, there's this quote from Jeffrey Epstein talking about how I have met a lot of bad people in my day. Donald Trump is by far the worst. Not one like redeeming quality about that individual, that soul. And this is like somebody who was reportedly one of his friends, and this is somebody who literally ran a sex trafficking island. So, the worst person he knows. And I just wanted to point that
No,
out to
no.
illustrate, like,
He said. To be accurate, he said Donald Trump is the worst person I know. He has no scruples. When the child predator says that you have no morals, no scruples, you messed up.
mhm. And it's worth pointing out, whatever else we find out about this that gets made public, people are going to be finding out a lot of uncomfortable things, especially, if you have people in your circles or your family who either don't pay attention to politics or are actively, voted for the guy or MAGA types. And it'll be easy to sit here and say, like, yeah, real Scooby-Doo mystery that one was. But I do want to urge leftists, there's as you start seeing, people burning their MAGA merch and stuff, that does present an opportunity to have a conversation, have a dialogue with these people, try to explain to them how they were so thoroughly bamboozled and kind of the role of again like capital and the ruling class and why these kinds of crimes happen and why they get covered up and how somebody like Donald Trump was able to project this image of himself while being like just a really just terrible human being. Um, and
You are a much better person than I am. I like
okay.
you. So there has been that school of thought. You've been seeing Marjorie Taylor Greene do her redemption tour. Her trying to she didn't actually apologize, but she went on CNN trying to apologize and redeem her image because now she's getting death threats
Yeah, I
because
saw that.
she because the leopards are now eating her face, and
Yep.
now she wants
Hmm.
to go online and talk about we need to tone down the rhetoric. And and there are other people on the left who are trying to bring her and people like her over to our side. No, Absolutely not.
No,
Ab,
that's a
ab,
bridge too
I'm
far. No.
I am I am
It's, uh, yeah,
so I'm saying this, and I'm saying this now. People
right.
like that chose to throw wood and gasoline on that fire, and
Hmm.
now they are being burnt by that fire. You chose to 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 stoke this fire, and now you're upset or you're upset when the fire starts going after you, when the leopard's starting to eat your face.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. No. Um, do I have sympathy and empathy for her? Yes, dog. Like, no one should be getting death threats. Her kids shouldn't be getting death threats. But this is the same woman when David Hodge, that was telling uh victims of school shootings that they were crisis actors. This is the same woman that was posting guns online, talking about people, Second Amendment voters need to do something about the squad. This is the same
Yep.
woman that was threatening the Speaker of the House with their rhetoric when it came to political violence. And now, since your savior has turned on you because it finally affected you. Same thing when it came to the ACA and healthcare
Yeah,
premiums.
that
She would start,
that monster you helped build is finally like trampling around in your neighborhood by your
yeah,
house. It's a
yeah.
Mhm.
She did not care about healthcare until it started affecting her kids. So it started affecting her family. She didn't care about the Epstein files and things of that nature until she saw it was politically expedient for her because she wanted to go for higher office. And the Trump team said, no, we don't support you running for higher office because you're going to lose. And now she's a woman scorned. And now she's trying to soften her image, and act like she didn't say that it was Jewish space lasers that caused forest
Yeah, yeah.
fires. Like she's not the one that were threatening AOC and Ilhan Omar, uh, the disparaging things that she said about Jasmine Crockett. Like, no, can people be redeemed, and can you do better after you mess up? Yes, but you have to do more than just go on a media apology tour. You need to go meet the people that you harmed and apologize to them in person. You did that messed up stuff in public. You need to go apologize to them in person in public. That's what you need to do.
Oh yeah, because like
Until she
I'm glad you
until she
pointed this
does
out
that.
because this whole apology tour definitely seems to be very politically calculated. Yeah,
It is.
see, yeah, mhm.
No, and but again, I have no problem saying yes and taking the win when you're coming to our side on an issue. However, I will not take you any more seriously if you're going to continue the same crazy conspiracy theories because again, she her first year in office, she went to the America First alt-right Christian nationalist conference. She was one of the guest speakers. She acts like she did not know who Nick Fuentes was, but you went to a conference that he
Yeah.
put on.
You sure about that?
The
You
leader,
sure? No.
the leader of the Grapers, the new neo Nazis, the leaders, the leader of a group of people who were implicated in Charlie Kirk's death, and you were their swastika Barbie. You were their Barbie. You were their champion. And now, because of this division on the right, with MAGA wanting to be America first, American only, yeah, they're Christian nationalists. They're fundamentalist nationalists. And it is the right wing's logical conclusion. I think that's the thing that people are not grasping, because people like Ben Shapiro and Vivek Ramaswamy and even JD Vance, For years, y'all were saying it's okay to disrespect and be racist towards black people, immigrants and brown people, Asian people, Native American people, indigenous people, Native American people, um, brown Muslim people, and you have Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and others that were saying, "Hey, that's great. We're also going to add women and Jewish people in that conversation." And you had Ben Shapiro and Marjorie and Megan Kelly say, "Hey, we agree with you on adding women, but we shouldn't add Jewish people." And Nick's like, "Nah, we're gonna add them too." That's the logical conclusion of their ideology. And now that ideology is turning to be the mainstream and majority opinion. Because honestly, what's the difference between Stephen Miller and Nick Fuentes? When it comes to policy, when it comes to actual policy that they
Mhm.
want to do, what is the difference? I, um, outside of the fact that one wants to uh, do weapons deals with the Israeli government to continue doing a genocide, continue their genocide, so we can use Israel as a forwarding operating base, right? We can
Mhm.
use their government and their proximity as a way to apply pressure and power in the region. And the others like, nah, we don't want to mess with them at all. Other than that, they agree on everything else. Like it
Mhm.
it it bothers me. And this is the reason why I'm like, no, I will take the yes from people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or others when if they want to agree with us on a policy and they're coming to us to agree on a policy. Other than that, those demons can stay where they are. They are
Yeah.
not invited
Mm.
to those demons, those vampires are the vampires in sinners. They are not welcome in this
Oh
establishment.
man.
Okay?
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
care. I don't care. I don't care that they can play a good song. They can play that good song down the street.
I don't know. I think that's kind of insulting because the vampires from Sinners at least had some rhythm. I don't know. Oh God.
Nah, dog. But yeah.
All right.
But
I think
yeah.
Lawrence, we're gonna have to wrap it up there. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Any other last thoughts before we close out?
Um, if I haven't said it, I mean, there's a lot of international news that we haven't had a chance to get to. Um, people of the because of hurricane season and things of that nature, people in Jamaica and in the islands in
Yeah.
Haiti are have been being devastated, getting devastated. So there's a number of organizations that are so trying to help uh bring money to those to the islands. Um, I think one of the volcanoes in Hawaii also erupted a few yesterday or a day ago. That was wild. Um, the situation in Libya and in Darfur and in Sudan is crazy. We don't talk about it enough. Where those the people in those countries are also being slaughtered as well, and it's looked at as a humanitarian crisis. Um, Zateo. Shout out to Zateo. Shout out to Mehdi Hassan. The documentary that they released about the young girl that was killed by the IDF in a car with her family. Um, if you haven't read that documentary or saw it, it's out. It's on their page. Shout out to them. It's a fantastic source of news. Shout out to Zateo. Man, I know we keep saying that we're going to be doing more content, and I want people to know that we are. It's just we have a lot of stuff that's been going on lately. So yeah, just stay tuned.
All right. Thank you, Lawrence. And then again, you can find us online, Facebook, YouTube, Media Cyphers, Kalamazoo Podcast on most podcasting apps. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.